Housing and Human Rights Law and Overview. Overview. Housing and human rights law intersect to ensure that individuals have access to adequate housing while being protected from discrimination and violations of their rights. The right to housing is often considered a fundamental human right. Under international human rights law, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights recognize the right to adequate housing. This means housing that is affordable, habitable, and respects cultural adequacy. Additionally, the European Convention on Human Rights, ECHR, protects the right to respect for one's home under Article 8. In the UK, housing and human rights are connected through laws like the Human Rights Act 1998, which incorporates the ECHR into domestic law. This means that public authorities must act in ways that respect individuals' human rights, including housing-related rights. The Equality Act 2010 prohibits housing discrimination based on protected characteristics like race, gender, and disability. Challenges arise in cases of homelessness, forced evictions, and issues related to social housing. Balancing public policy objectives with individual rights can be complex. Legal experts in housing. Housing and human rights law intersect in various ways to ensure that individuals have access to adequate and affordable housing, and are protected from discrimination and homelessness. Several international and national human rights instruments address the right to housing, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, and the European Convention on Human Rights, ECHR. These documents recognize housing as a fundamental human right. Here are a few key aspects of housing and human rights law. 1. Right to adequate housing. The right to adequate housing is a fundamental human right recognized in international law. Adequate housing includes not only four walls and a roof but also access to essential services, sufficient living space, security of tenure, and affordability. 2. Protection against discrimination. Human rights laws prohibit housing discrimination based on race, color, sex, religion, national origin, disability, and other protected characteristics. In the UK, the Equality Act 2010 prohibits discrimination in housing and other areas based on various protected characteristics. 3. Protection from forced evictions. International human rights law protects individuals from arbitrary or unlawful forced evictions. Proper legal procedures, adequate notice, and access to alternative housing solutions are essential components of this protection. 4. Homelessness and vulnerable groups. Human rights law addresses the rights of homeless individuals and vulnerable groups such as refugees, asylum seekers, and internally displaced persons. States are obligated to provide adequate shelter and support to these groups. 5. Social housing. Human rights principles are often invoked in debates about social housing policies. Access to affordable social housing is considered essential for fulfilling the right to housing, particularly for low-income individuals and families. 6. Right to housing and health. Adequate housing is closely linked to the right to health. Poor living conditions and homelessness can have detrimental effects on physical and mental health. Human rights frameworks emphasize the interconnectedness of these rights. It's important to note that the specific implementation and protection of housing rights can vary between countries and regions. Individuals facing housing-related issues are often encouraged to seek legal advice or assistance from local human rights organizations or legal aid services to understand their rights and options fully. Thanks for watching a video about housing and human rights law. Please share,